Just for clarity, do you think a trans woman is a real woman?
I don't really like the way those questions are formulated. You know, I don't know what that means. What do you mean a real woman?
Well, I'm asking you, in your mind, you know, it depends what you think a real woman is, but do you think a trans woman is a woman?
No.
Why not?
Because I think that women are capable, generally speaking, of having babies, and they have female genitalia, and they have an XX chromosome, and I think the biological markers are relevant. It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't think that people should be treated with respect and dignity if they happen not to fit easily into a gender category. That's a different issue.
Right.
But it's a matter of definition, and I actually think it's a foolish argument in some sense, because what do you mean by real?
Well, I mean, you've just clarified that, though. You don't think that a trans woman is a woman.
Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like, you're certainly willing to risk offending me.
You know, we call somebody what they want to be called in our society. For instance, I don't call somebody Julie if they prefer to be called Jordan. That's just basic human courtesy. Here's a great little tip for people who are despairing at the possibility of remembering all those pronouns. What I do is just program in the pronoun next to the person's name in my smartphone. So whenever I'm out and about and I've forgotten whether one of my trans friends uses ze or zer or they or them or something else, I just look it up and it's really super easy. Mostly with this Peterson controversy, which is really just a small drama, a tempest in a teapot, you know, he could just get over learning to program a few pronouns into his phone. By the way, I only have half a dozen or so that I actually use on an everyday basis, so it's not all that difficult.
Professor Peterson, sorry, Professor Peterson, I'm going to jump in because I think Professor Peterson wants to get in on that.
Yeah, well, kindness is the excuse that social justice warriors use when they want to exercise control over what other people think and say. So, you know, if we're bandying back and forth our differences in values, you know, I would say that the highest possible value is truth, and that one of the concomitants is that we need stringent protection for freedom of speech so that we can utter the truths that we see fit. And I think that that's a value that's much higher than kindness, for example. I mean, there's lots of situations in life where kindness in the immediate present is not the appropriate way to react at all. But so, for example, when you discipline children, you often hurt their feelings in the short term so that they can learn to behave properly in the medium to long term so that their lives go well. And so this automatic assumption that the people on the social justice warrior side of the equation are motivated only by kindness when they're also clearly motivated by power is something I find completely untenable. And when I see a stranger, I call them by the pronoun that seems to be in accordance with their presented appearance. And
that's you
they
being
appear
lazy,
that way.
Jordan. That's you being lazy. I think there's a very high value that we should also be aiming for in addition to truth. By the way, throughout this whole controversy, I have told the truth at every turn. So, you know, trying to imply that that's not what's happening on people on the social justice... Am I a social justice warrior? I don't know. But I think that we should be aiming for pluralism. This means recognizing more than one set of fundamental principles, fostering independent cultural traditions of minorities, and being willing to share power with people who are different than you. I think if you just stop centering this whole controversy on yourself and how hard it is for you to accommodate genderqueer people, well, have a little bit of sympathy. I mean, those of us who are trans encounter much more greater indignities every day and every week of the month. For example, have you recently had a bank employee accuse you of trying to masquerade as yourself at a bank and then locking down your ATM card and credit card so that you can't use any money? Those are the sorts of problems that trans people face every day, being out of housing, being considered, you know, considering suicide. These are really big problems.
My refusal to use pronouns because left-wing activists want me to use them has nothing to do with whether or not trans people are having difficulties in society. And I'd also like to point out that I've had many letters of support.
Isn't it?
I've had many letters of support from trans people, and they tell me that the trans activists don't support them, and most trans people
Jordan,
actually wanted to be referred to as he or she.
Doesn't mean
they
that
weren't
you
my
are
friends.
Untransphobic.
They
just
weren't
because
my
you
friends.
know a few people, just because you've talked
I
to a few
didn't know
trans
them.
people, you don't know the trans community like the trans community does. You've got no idea what it's like to be trans.
Professor Pete, Professor Peterson, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's let Professor Peterson finish his thought, please.
All right. So the trans activists aren't proper representatives of the trans community because they haven't been elected by the trans community.
Nobody elected you either, Jordan.
I'm not speaking for anyone except myself and on behalf of other people perhaps who want to maintain the right to free speech. I'm not claiming that I'm a representative of white people or white men or any other group. I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I believe that this legislation is extraordinarily dangerous. Protection for gender expression, and I've looked at gender expression in the Ontario Human Rights Code, and as far as I can tell, gender expression is best summarized in a single word: fashion. No. Because it's the way that you present yourself in public with your clothing and your manner of dress. And so I also think that the legislation that we are bringing forth with Bill C-16, and that's already in place in places like Ontario, also makes fashion criticism something akin to a hate crime. And because there's been so much noise about the identity component of this, we haven't even talked about gender expression. This is appalling legislation. And the idea that referring to someone by the pronoun of their choice is going to radically improve their status in society or their mental health is a completely unproven assumption. I think it'll have exactly the opposite effect.
I have nothing against trans or gay people. I just find it wrong that everyone needs to accept or believe what they believe. Because I don't, I don't believe that a trans woman is a real woman. No, a trans woman is just a man that's had a transformation into a woman. That's a trans woman. That's never a real woman. She can't have babies. Never will. Never ever will. It doesn't matter how she or he tries. And it's the same with a trans man. He's a cockless man, all right? Call himself Stacy if he wants. He's not Stacy. Can't have kids, doesn't have ovaries, can't produce milk, can't do anything women can do. Anything, all right? So you're not a woman. You're not a lady. It's that simple, all right? I'm not trying to hurt anyone or hurt you, but you have a disorder. It's called gender disorder. Gender dysmorphic, or something where you see yourself as a woman in a different body or a man in a different body. That's a disorder. And I'm sorry you have a disorder. It's unfortunate you have a disorder, but he's still a guy. Any guy, born a guy, is always going to be a guy. Always. Not my opinion or how I feel. It's fact. And you can't change fact. And I see that's what everybody's trying to do, rewrite what's normal. If you're transphobic if you don't agree with the trans community, or you're homophobic if you don't agree with the LGBT community. If you want to be gay, but don't tell my son he's homophobic for not wanting to kiss a gay guy, or he's homophobic for not wanting to wear a dress, and I'm homophobic because I don't want my son to wear a dress. No, you could take that and do with that. You understand what I'm saying? Women that worked really hard and trained really hard to get where they are now being stepped on by these trends that they're obviously bigger and stronger and have estrogen, testosterone and stuff. And it doesn't matter if they're now on some treatment to bring down their testosterone level. They're already big. They're already men. They already got the muscle and the mass and the strength. You understand? They're already dominant. Okay. And before you start about women and men are equal, we're not. Okay, women and men are not equal. Men are bigger, men are stronger, men are tougher. That's like the men's sports is separate from the women's sports. Men boxing is separate because men hit harder, we're stronger, we're faster. That's a fact. Doesn't matter how you feel about that, or you think I'm misogynist about that, or you think I'm being sexist. It's a fact, right? Women could take more pain, I understand, from like babies and stuff like that. But on the whole, women and men are different. We're different species altogether. Women think differently. Men think differently. We're not the same. All right?